Ethan gripped the strap of his backpack tightly as he walked home. The cold November wind cut across his face, but nothing was as chilling as the weight in his chest. School, despite its challenges, was a temporary refuge, a place where he didn't have to constantly measure every step, every word, every breath. But now, as he rounded the corner and saw the two-story house with peeling paint on the porch, he knew the truce was over. Inside that house, Greg was waiting for him. Greg had become Ethan's stepfather 3 years ago when his mother, Amanda, remarried. At first, Greg seemed like just a quiet and distant man, but as the months passed, his coldness turned into something much darker. It started with words: useless brat, dead weight, weakling. Then came the shoves, the slaps, and finally the punches, always hidden beneath long-sleeved shirts and poorly rehearsed excuses. The worst part was his mother's empty stare. Amanda never intervened. She pretended not to see. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of denial, maybe because the sick love she felt for Greg blinded her. Ethan climbed the porch steps carefully, trying not to make any noise as he opened the door. "Think this is a hotel, brat?" Greg's voice rang out from the couch, accompanied by the clinking of a beer bottle. Ethan froze. I came straight home after school. Liar. I saw you talking to that old man next door. Trying to turn him against me?" The old man next door was Mr. Dawson, a 70-year-old man who always greeted him with a kind smile and secretly gave him candy. "No, sir. I just said hi." But Greg was already standing up, his dark eyes flashing with anger. "So you're calling me a liar?" The first blow came too fast for Ethan to dodge. A slap across the face that sent him stumbling backward. The metallic taste of blood filled his mouth. Amanda appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face filled with distress, but she said nothing. She did nothing. "Go to your room and don't come out until I say so." Ethan ran upstairs, holding back tears. He had learned a long time ago that crying only made things worse. In his small, dark room, he lay on his bed and closed his eyes. The pain in his face was nothing compared to the pain inside him. But something inside Ethan began to change that night. He was tired. Tired of living in fear. Tired of accepting that his life would always be like this. And for the first time, he thought about escaping. Ethan's room was small, with faded blue walls and an old wardrobe that smelled of mold. The only thing he truly liked in there was the small bookshelf filled with books he had found in the trash and rescued. He lost himself in them whenever he could. In books, no one hit him. In books, he could be a hero. The neighborhood where he lived was simple, a collection of small houses in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. During the day, it seemed like a peaceful place, with kids playing on the sidewalks and elderly men tending their gardens. But inside his house, peace did not exist. Greg worked as a security guard at a bar, but he spent most of his time at home drinking. His stench of alcohol mixed with cigarette smoke clung to the furniture. Amanda, Ethan's mother, worked as a waitress in a restaurant and always seemed too tired to notice what was happening under her own roof. Whenever Ethan tried to get close, subtly asking for help, she would look away. And then there was Mr. Dawson. The old man next door was a kind-faced, white-haired man who had lived alone since his wife passed away. He spent his days sitting on his porch watching the street. Every time he saw Ethan, he would offer him candy or a few kind words. "Everything okay, kid?" he asked one afternoon when Ethan returned from school. Ethan wanted to say no, that nothing was okay, but years of fear stopped him. "Yes, sir. Everything's fine." The old man looked at him with wise blue eyes and sighed. "If you ever need help, you know where to find me." The words echoed in Ethan's mind. Did someone actually care? Amanda hadn't always been like this. Before Greg, she was a loving mother. But after the marriage, she faded, becoming just a shadow of who she used to be. Maybe she was afraid of Greg. Maybe she thought she deserved that life. Once, when Ethan was 8 years old, he asked why she didn't try to leave. "Because sometimes it's easier to endure than to face something worse, son." But Ethan didn't believe that. He didn't want to grow up thinking that pain was normal. That night, as he lay in bed, a plan started to form in his mind. He had to get out of there. And for the first time, he felt a spark of hope. The following days were even harder for Ethan. Greg seemed to be getting more aggressive, as if he could sense that something inside the boy was changing. He didn't want Ethan to have hope. One night, after a fierce argument between Amanda and Greg, the man stormed into Ethan's room, furious. "You've been poisoning your mother against me, haven't you?" Ethan didn't even have time to answer before Greg grabbed him by the shirt and shoved him against the wall. Pain exploded in his back, but he didn't scream. He wouldn't give his stepfather that satisfaction. "You're dead weight in this house. If it were up to me, I'd have gotten rid of you a long time ago." He left the room, slamming the door, leaving Ethan trembling. The decision was made. He couldn't wait any longer. The next morning, Ethan grabbed an old backpack and started packing what he could. Some clothes, a pack of crackers from the kitchen, and the few dollars he had saved over the months. He just needed a place to go. Then he remembered Mr. Dawson. That afternoon, after school, he hesitated for a moment before climbing the steps of the old man's porch. "Mr. Dawson, I need help." The old man looked at him for a long time before opening the door and letting him in. Ethan told him everything. "I can't stay there anymore. If I do, he's going to kill me." Mr. Dawson held Ethan's hand and said, in a firm voice, "You don't have to go back there, kid. Promise." Ethan's heart pounded. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone. But the real nightmare was just beginning. That night, Ethan slept at Mr. Dawson's house for the first time. The old man made him a warm bowl of soup and offered a soft blanket on the couch. It was the first time in years Ethan felt safe. "Tomorrow morning we'll sort this out, kid. You won't suffer at that man's hands anymore." But Greg noticed his absence. In the middle of the night, a loud noise echoed through the street. Ethan woke up to violent banging on Mr. Dawson's door. "Open this door, old man. I know he's in there." Greg's voice was thick with rage and alcohol. Mr. Dawson calmly got up, picked up the phone, and dialed a number. "Greg, go away. I already called the police." Silence. Then more banging. "That kid is my problem. He needs to learn to respect me." Ethan curled up on the couch, his heart racing. Mr. Dawson didn't seem scared, but Ethan knew Greg wouldn't give up so easily. 5 minutes later, sirens shattered the silence of the night. When the police arrived, Greg had already returned home, but the neighbors had seen everything. The officers questioned Ethan, and for the first time he told them everything. That night changed everything. Greg was arrested. Ethan was taken by social workers, but before getting into the car, he held Mr. Dawson's hand. "Thank you." The old man smiled. "You don't have to thank me, kid. You deserved this." As the car drove away, Ethan looked out the window. For the first time, he didn't feel like a prisoner in his own life. The following days were a whirlwind. Ethan was placed in a temporary shelter while the police and social workers investigated his situation. Greg remained in jail, awaiting trial, and Amanda was under investigation for negligence. Ethan felt a mix of relief and fear. He didn't want to go back home, but he also didn't know what would come next. One afternoon, while sitting in the shelter's cafeteria, a social worker approached him. "Ethan, we need to talk." He followed her into a small room. Sitting there, waiting, he felt his heart race. "Your mother has made a decision," the social worker said. "She has requested to give up custody." Ethan's world stopped. "What?" "She says she doesn't feel capable of taking care of you, and that it would be better if you stayed with another family." He didn't know if he felt relieved or hurt. Had his mother really given up on him? "Does that mean I'll be adopted?" The social worker hesitated. "First, you would go to a foster family. Or, we have another option." Ethan frowned. "What is it?" "Mr. Dawson has filed to become your legal guardian." His eyes widened. "What? He wants to take care of me?" "Yes. He said you need someone who truly cares." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. After so long feeling alone, someone finally wanted him. The decision was made. He wanted a new beginning, and maybe, for the first time in his life, he could truly be happy. The temporary guardianship was approved. Ethan was now officially living with Mr. Dawson. First, everything felt strange. He wasn't used to a home without yelling, without fear. In the first few days, he still expected to hear Greg's voice calling his name threateningly. But Mr. Dawson was different. Here you can relax, kid. No one will hurt you anymore. Still, the emotional scars didn't disappear so quickly. One night, Ethan accidentally dropped a glass on the floor and instinctively flinched, bracing for a slap or a scream. But Mr. Dawson just chuckled and grabbed a broom. It happens. Let's clean it up together. That was the moment Ethan realized he was safe. But the past still haunted him. Word spread at school about what had happened, and the whispers began. Some classmates looked at him with pity. Others mocked him. The kid who got beaten by his stepfather. It hurt. He wanted to be more than Greg's victim. One day, when a boy at school tried to taunt him, something in Ethan changed. You'll never understand what I went through, but I survived. For the first time, he felt proud. Life wouldn't be perfect, but now he had a chance. And he was ready to take it. The months passed, and Ethan started getting used to his new life with Mr. Dawson. The old man was kind, patient, and never pushed him to talk about the past. He was just there, ready to listen whenever Ethan was ready to speak. But the pain of the past didn't fade easily. He still had nightmares. Sometimes, he would wake up in the middle of the night, sweating and gasping, with Greg's voice echoing in his mind. In the first few days, he would stay awake for hours, hugging his knees in the dark, afraid to move. One night, Mr. Dawson heard him and walked into the room. Nightmares? Ethan hesitated, then nodded. The old man pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. You know, when I was young, I fought in a war. I saw horrible things, and for many years, the nightmares followed me. But one day, I realized something. The past can't hurt me anymore. I survived. Ethan looked at him. How do I forget? You don't forget, kid. But you learn that you don't have to be afraid anymore. The words stuck with Ethan. At school, things started to change, too. He didn't hide anymore. If someone tried to provoke him, he ignored them. If someone tried to humiliate him, he stood up for himself. He started doing better in his classes. He even made a friend, Jake, a boy who loved comic books and video games. And for the first time, Ethan started to feel like just another kid his age. But the biggest challenge was yet to come. One afternoon, Mr. Dawson received a call from social services. Amanda wanted to see Ethan. He didn't know how to feel about it. Part of him wanted to see her. Part of him hated her for abandoning him. But deep down, he knew he needed this meeting. When he arrived at the designated place, Amanda was sitting in a chair, looking nervous. Her eyes were filled with guilt. Hi, Ethan. He sat down across from her. Hi. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Amanda started crying. I'm sorry. I should have protected you. I should have been a better mother. Ethan swallowed hard. Why didn't you do anything? Because I was afraid. Because I was weak. But that's not an excuse. I failed you. Ethan didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to forgive her. Another part wanted to scream. In the end, he simply said, I'm okay now. Amanda nodded, wiping her tears. That's what matters most. When he left that place, he realized that, for the first time, he no longer carried the weight of guilt. The past would stay in the past. He was ready to move on. Ethan thought that after meeting his mother, things would get easier. But life always had unexpected surprises. One day, after school, he found Mr. Dawson sitting in the living room, holding a letter. His usually calm face was tense. What happened? Ethan asked, feeling a chill in his stomach. The old man sighed and handed him the letter. It was a court document. Greg had gotten a lawyer and was trying to reduce his sentence. He claimed Ethan's accusations were exaggerated, that he was never as violent as the boy had said. And worse, he wanted to see Ethan. Ethan's heart pounded. He wants to see me? His voice trembled. Yes, but you don't have to go. It's your decision. Fear crept into Ethan's chest. The very thought of facing Greg again made his hands sweat. What if he gets out of prison? What if he comes after me? Mr. Dawson placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Listen to me, kid. That man has no power over you anymore. He can't hurt you. You're not that helpless little boy anymore. Ethan took a deep breath. What would he do? Run from this fear forever? Or face it head-on? He looked at the letter once more and made his decision. He was going to see Greg. But this time he wouldn't be the victim. He would be strong. He would show Greg that he had no control over him anymore. Here is the final part of the translation. The visitation room was cold and lifeless. Ethan sat at the table, his heart pounding in his chest. Mr. Dawson was waiting outside. He wasn't alone. Then the door opened. Greg walked in, his hands cuffed, wearing the orange uniform of an inmate. He looked different, thinner, dark circles under his eyes. His expression wasn't filled with rage like before. It was something else. Desperation. He sat down across the table and stared at Ethan for a few seconds before speaking. So, you actually came? Ethan held his gaze firmly. Yeah. Greg let out a deep sigh. Look, kid. He ran a hand over his face. Things got out of control. I made mistakes. But I'm not the monster you painted me to be. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He expected Greg to try and justify himself, but he didn't expect him to be so shameless about it. You beat me. You called me trash. You made my life a living hell, Ethan said, his voice steady, without trembling. That wasn't a mistake, Greg. That was who you chose to be. For a brief moment, Greg's eyes flickered with anger, but he controlled himself. I was under a lot of pressure. Your mother. Everything was a mess. I drank too much, but I never wanted things to go that far. Ethan felt a deep anger rising within him. You always had a choice. You chose to hurt me. You chose to make me feel like I was worthless. Greg leaned forward. So what do you want now? An apology? Ethan took a deep breath. No. Greg frowned. Then why did you come? Ethan looked him straight in the eye. To tell you that you lost. Greg blinked, confused. What? Ethan smiled for the first time. You tried to break me. You tried to make me believe I was nothing. But I am so much stronger than you ever were. I survived you, and I will never be afraid of you again. Greg opened his mouth to reply but said nothing. Ethan stood up. Goodbye, Greg. I hope you rot in here. Without looking back, he walked out of the room. When he found Mr. Dawson waiting for him, he felt something he had never felt before. Freedom. The weight he had carried for years was finally gone. Greg had no power over him anymore, and he never would again. The days after the prison visit felt different. Ethan felt lighter, as if he had finally let go of something he had been carrying for too long. For the first time, he could sleep without fear. Mr. Dawson noticed the change. You seem more at peace, kid. And he was. School started feeling like a better place, too. He focused on his studies, made new friends, and even joined the reading club. One afternoon, as he was walking home, he found Jake, his best friend, waiting on the sidewalk. Hey dude, there's a gaming tournament on Saturday. You in? Ethan smiled. Definitely. When he got home, Mr. Dawson was sitting on the porch, sipping tea. Ethan sat beside him and took a deep breath. You know, I never thought I could be happy. The old man smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Happiness was always there, kid. You just needed to free yourself from the past to see it. And at that moment, Ethan knew he was finally ready to move forward. The past no longer defined him. He was free, and he was just beginning his new life. 5 years later, Ethan walked through the school hallways, now 15 years old. He wasn't the scared boy he used to be. He had overcome his fears, built real friendships, and found a true home with Mr. Dawson. That afternoon, while reading a book in the library, he noticed a young child sitting alone, looking scared. Something in the boy's eyes felt familiar. Ethan smiled and walked over. Hey, want some company? The child nodded timidly. And in that moment, Ethan realized that just as Mr. Dawson had done for him, it was now his turn to help someone else find hope.